Nathan's hands moved across my face. Fingers lightly grazing the velvety eye slapped at him with the flesh of my cheek. Swiftly, but he sidestepped my attempt to halt. He smiles and pulls back, and Nathan stops. I said, sounding a little frustrated. The tiny living area was filled with laughing and full of the noise from our games, the warmth of our laughs as we joke around slicing through the chilly winter air, putting pressure on the room's windows was a comfortable haven from the cold outside. Nathan had always been a tease, even before he died. When he was younger, he had this innate charm capable of illuminating any area, and as a 26-year-old adult, the charm had only gotten stronger as I gazed at him. Son is now wider and taller than a man in all senses, while maintaining the mischievous behavior that had always made him. His tangled dark hair was adorable. From our amusing altercation and his blue mom, he murmured, his eyes sparkling with amusement. Grinning and bending closer, his breath, you know you love me when you're warm against my neck. I rolled my eyes, acting as though I was irritated, but I couldn't deny Nathan had a method of speaking the truth. Of giving me a sense of belonging, affection, and supported, even during times such as these. The relationship had always been solid, but it worsened a year after Robert's death. My husband used to be the object of my affection. Losing him had been like losing life. Nathan had been a part of me, but anchor providing me with motivation to continue. I'd like to share a little more about myself. I'm Matilda, and I'm 62 years old. I present myself with grace and confidence. I've had a full life that has been full of problems and love and memories that influenced. I'm pleased with how my curves look. Are evidence of the years spent alive. And affectionately Robert, my spouse, had died unexpectedly, leaving a void, and Nathan was just 25 years old at the time of our lives. Entering adulthood and losing Robert dealt a terrible blow, and even though grief seemed unbearable, suffering, Nathan and I became closer to one another. The friendship remained strong even after Robert was alive. He would frequently make jokes about me, showed Nathan too much affection, taking precedence over him, but nothing could have grown further from reality. My affection for they were equal, but distinct in their own right. Robert served as both my rock and my partner during my pride and light. After all, was Nathan. When Robert died, Nathan became my pillar of support, assisting me in bearing the burden of managing our family company and dealing with the grief of losing my husband. Connected us in a manner that nothing else could, and we supported one another. He provided me strength on days when I needed it most, when I thought I had nothing, and I then reminded him of the affection of his father and the legacy that we were creating jointly, and thus, we found ourselves in this comfortable small room. We find solace in our laughter. Relationship and the unsaid mutual comprehension between Nathan and me shared an intimacy that other people could find uncommon, but it seemed as normal to us as we laughed and played together while breathing. Discovering happiness in the most basic things. On some nights, he would take a nap, head on my chest as I held him in my arms, similar to how I felt when he was a newborn. It served as a reassuring reminder of the connection. Even as he grew older, we had always shared. He continued to look for solace in my hugging me tightly as though he were that little youngster who previously required my assistance. I never saw him chase away his worries. If there was anything wrong with it, it was how we were retaining the affection and bond that had sustained us. As much as the months went by, our connection changed in ways we didn't anticipate. It wasn't only the physical intimacy they shared soaks up the late-night chats, but something more profound, a bond that exceeded the typical limitations of motherhood and son. Our relationship turned into the cornerstone of my life, a place where I discovered comfort and power in life. Placed us in unfamiliar territory, and we made adjustments that others would not have made. Comprehend, but it felt so ideal. Nathan was more than just my son, as was natural to us. He was now my grieving buddy, assurance, and my steadfast assistance each evening. Following the commotion of running, Nathan and I would work for the family business, become comfortable in our home. The living room served as our haven, where the day's burden appeared to lift, leaving only the silent bond in its place. The room we shared was little, but warm and inviting. In the gentle golden light of an antique lamp in the corner table's illumination enveloped the space in warmth that creates a sense of security from the outside world. Nathan would always sit near me occasionally, so near that our shoulders met. His presence was consistent and comforting. Silent confirmation that I wasn't dealing with obstacles of life on our own, but we didn't always express the silence that exists between us. Cozy and brimming with an unsaid realizing that words couldn't capture. One custom that we both like was our communal baths. It started as a straightforward Nathan's act of generosity that he had observed my level of overwhelm after Robert's death and decided to oneself to provide peaceful moments, for he would carefully prepare everything for me. Turning on the bathtub and adding a small amount of lavender oil, understanding how much I was calmed by the tub's soothing aroma. Spacious and opulent enough for us to Nathan share without feeling crammed. Would assist me in steadily stepping in his hand. Me, as I gradually entered the warm water, that we'd sit next to one another and let the heat refresh our weary bodies occasionally. Sit quietly and comfortably, the only noises being the sporadic burst of water or the heater's gentle tea in the background. Throughout other conversations with Nathan would reminisce about his dad. Narrating tales that both made us. He would laugh and weep as he talked about his aspirations for the family company, how he wished to broaden it and pay tribute to Robert's. His remarks were replete with legacy, love and perseverance, and I was unable to can't help but feel proud of him. For you believe our father would be pleased with us? One evening, Nathan inquired about his voice. Bearing a mixture of hope and vulnerability, I brushed my fingertip across his face to cue him. His jawline's faint stubble. Nathan is already there, he has always been. Thus is he leaning toward me to touch his blue eyes looking into mine as though looking for. In that instant, the room felt reassured. The world is quieter and smaller, as though it focused on the two of us during those at times. The bath evolved from it was a spot where we could relax. Deeper connection between Nathan's, the attention and concern reminded me of how important I was to him, and so I made an effort to be the constant presence he required as he made his way through maturity without the direction of his father. These evenings, that became the high point of my day. When the weight of accountability diminished, superseded by the basic coziness of enjoying the water's warmth together, the calming aroma of lavender and Nathan's constant presence convinced me feel protected, loved, and encouraged in a method I didn't believe was feasible after losing Robert. Despite living outside of our home's walls were frequently demanding and unsure about these moments with, I was reminded by Nathan that I was not alone. Together, our routines provided us with comfort, giving our life a new rhythm, one based on compassion, love, and we gained strength from one another over time. Overcame the outward signs of as we became closer. He would sit next to his head resting on my lap as I sit on the couch, went through his hair with my fingertips, and it was an unwritten contract as a means of grounding ourselves in each other's comfort. He laid his head on my shoulder one evening. You are everything to me, he said in his chest. His words hung thick in the air. Mama. I gave him a meaningful forehead kiss. Heart enlarging with a range of feelings, pride, love, and a sense of obligation so deep that it seemed like a burden and a privilege. We simultaneously constructed our lives, our habits around one another. One evening, I sat with them smoothly entwined. Unable to fall asleep at the edge of my bed, the burden of loss weighed heavily on me. Continuous reminder of the entire amount left by when my husband passed away too soon. My eyes were bloated from so many sleepless nights, and my heart hurts from a sense of isolation that nobody else could comprehend how much I missed him. His touch, his laughter, his presence, like if a piece of me had been torn away, creating a gap that unable to fill. As I gazed at our bedroom walls are attempting to push away the recollections that filled my head, Nathan heard the doors creak. Walked into his eyes, softly worried. He always recognized when something wasn't right. Even as a little child, it was one of the numerous factors that made our relationship so. Mom, you are strong and so unique, he added softly. Approaching me, I noticed you seated here, and I felt compelled to enter. His voice was calming to my ears like a balm. I gazed up at him, my kid, with an aching spirit. Dearest friend, and a tear started to fall down my. He extended his hand and placed it on his cheek. The warmth of his touch on my shoulder made me shudder. It was a straightforward gesture, but it was crucial to that. I murmured my voice to Nathan. I'm shaking and unsure of how to continue. I really miss him without him, and I need. Nathan leaned closer to him. You don't breathe warm against my skin. Must do this by me, he muttered. I'm always here for you, Mama, he said. produced tears and a flood of emotions. Dripping down my face, while I held on to him, he put his arms around me and held me firmly, as though attempting to take in my suffering. I felt protected and loved in his embrace. Loved, a sensation I hadn't encountered since the death of my husband, and it was puzzling as well as consoling. As we were absorbed in our common, Nathan's hands started to move in anguish, caressing my arms, hair, and back. Every touch was purposeful and infused with a kindness that left me speechless. I raised my head to peek into his. I discovered that they were packed with a blend of mom, love, and something darker and more profound. He spoke softly, barely raising his voice above a whisper. I want you to know how much I care. His confession weighed heavily on you. A wordless appeal for comprehension in the air. My pulse and heart began to beat more quickly, rushing in my ears while I attempted to comprehend. His remarks were hazardous and prohibited. However, they sparked an inward stirring, something I had long since buried. Prior to my reply, Nathan leaned in, his mouth moving across mine in a tentative kiss. Was nearly soft, respectful, as though he feared shattering me. But as soon as his lips met mine, I sensed a spark turn into a fire inside of me. I was unaware that it was still burning. Kissed him in return, my body reacting automatically in response to his mouth's touch. Even though it was completely wrong, it felt in a sense I was unable to describe. The kiss grew deeper and more desperate. Nathan's hands moved to cup with intensity, his fingers becoming tangled in my hair and my face. Our tongues touched as he drew me in, investigating one another with a fierce ferocity that made me gasp for air. Felt the fire rising between us. As the tension increases, Nathan's hands wander. His touch sent an electric shock down my back. Nathan, I gasped and felt goosebumps down my spine. As stepping back a little, we shouldn't be doing this, but instead of stopping, he kissed me once again, capturing my lips. I gave in after becoming increasingly demanding. To the feelings he was arousing inside, I tried my voice again. Nathan. His lips trailed a fiery trail as he shook route down to my jawline and along my "this is incorrect" neck. But even as I stated, threading was betrayed by my hands. Drawing nearer through his thick hair, I felt his warm breath on my skin. Then why does it feel so? He whispered. His lips slid lower, brushing perfectly over my collarbone, gentle and tenacious, causing my protests to fade into silence. Gasp, you're gorgeous, he remarked quietly. Eyes moving reverently over me, he leaned forward, and it caused my cheeks to flush. Once more, his lips found mine, kissing me. The way he kissed me this time was deeper, was slow, and neither rushed nor desperate. Intentional, as though he were trying to save her. I sensed his movements every second. His thumbs glide along my sides, sparking trails as it brushes across my ribcage. Everywhere he touched, Nathan, there was fire. My voice caught his lips as I whispered. Discovered his hands in the hollow of my throat. Slid down, landing on my hips and tugging. The heat of his body against me was intoxicating when compared to mine, and I could not help but cock my head back to allow him greater access to his lips. Came back to me, moving hungrily. It mimicked the way his hands cupped mine. My face with such gentleness that I tangled my fingers in his hair, shivering. Drawing him in while his mouth experimented my mouth, leaving no space unoccupied at all. Every touch intensified the sensation. Electrifying, the feeling was so intense. Heat and electricity were combined to create. Arch and I are at odds, wanting more of his. The assurance with which the hands moved despite his advanced age, there was a gentleness in every gesture that gave me comfort, made me felt loved. His lips trailed his hands, looking around and abandoning me, out of breath and wishing there was more time. Seems to merge as we became engrossed in each other, the outside world disappearing. Nathan was the only one with his touch. His hushed words and touches that made Nathan, I whispered once more. My heart is racing, speech quivering as his lips discovered there. This time, the kiss was returned to mine. Deeper, more powerful, and I sensed the traces of hesitation disappear. As the night dragged on, our breaths mixed. Every whisper, every kiss, every touch, the words sounded like a pledge or statement of something we were both unable to completely well spoken, but both understood, and we didn't stop for a long time after that. The sound of the following filled the room, our gasps, laughing, and whispers as we investigated one another and learned from one another. Curve each line and each secret as though time had stopped to give us this right now, during this endless night, when nothing only the two of us, Nathan's, mattered. His touch was reverent, and his lips never left mine. But with an increasing sense of urgency that he traced his fingers to mimic mine. Elaborate designs down my sides, giving a chill of excitement through. "You are everything I've ever desired," he said. Whispered, his voice full of passion. I quiet him by kissing my hands once more. Slipping down his back and sensing the tenseness in his muscles, warmth, and the strength with which he gazed at me as despite the fact that I was alone in the world, I should have since it was intoxicating. Ceased, which ought to have ended craziness, but each time I opened his touch silenced me as I opened my mouth to speak. Demonstrations enlightening me about his hands briefly touched my face as he kissed me once more, his thumbs grazing. "If this is too much, my cheeks will warn me." His eyes searched mine, laden with whispers. Concerned and passionate, "It's not me." In a hoarse whisper, I said, "I want you to do this." The words were almost gone from my lips before his captured mine once more, his kisses getting bigger. His hands roamed bolder and more demandingly, easily moving throughout every square inch of my skin, causing a fire to start that overtook me. I was unable to stop him. Couldn't, under any circumstances, bring him close enough. How hard I tried. The room's air became densely laden with the electricity that was present when my hands discovered slowly working their way into his hair. His mouth moved downward, following my throat's hollow and the bend of my neck. My chest rose, and his mouth was hot, laying a trail of flames against my skin. Every nerve in my body felt its aftermath. Alive, with each touch generating a surge of I lost the thrill that was flowing through me. Myself in the way he felt and the way he made me feel loved and wanted. I whispered that I adored Nathan. Shattering as his fingers moved down his name is drawing me closer to his thighs. Dropped from my mouth like a request or prayer. And an admission of all that I couldn't say. "Matilda," aloud. His voice whispered against my flesh. Shuddering with emotion, "You're amazing." The depth of his stare, the manner in which he regarded me as if I were his whole, I realized that the world made my heart tighten. Was incorrect and aware of what we were doing. Would have repercussions, but in that, for a time, I didn't care about anything. Did he make me feel the way I did? He held me as if he had no desire to time, lost all significance when we let it go. Gave up our bodies to one another and souls dancing together in a timeless dance. Our combined energy seemed to vibrate through the room. Our hearts blending with the force of our breaths. Finally, the night beats in accord. Nathan kept me in his arms as I wore it. Firmly encircling me, I laid my listening with his head down against his chest. His heartbeat's steady rhythm as it started to settle down, and we stayed for a while. The weight of what we have there in silence had settled over us, and I sensed the shame that was beginning to seep in when Nathan eventually glanced at. I said, "This shouldn't have happened." But I kept my arms around him gently. "I know," he answered, unwilling to let go. His tone was regretful, but I don't regret it without hesitation. I didn't either, even though it was incorrect to. Despite the repercussions we would face that I couldn't bring myself to be sorry for how he made me feel, but we both suffer from guilt. But we find comfort in embracing one another and promising to uphold our hidden from the public.